Oprah Winfrey is often described in superlatives: billionaire, media mogul, cultural force, and one of the most influential women in modern history. Her television presence reshaped daytime talk. Her recommendations could turn books into instant bestsellers, and her voice carried weight even among presidents and global leaders. Yet behind this extraordinary public stature lies a life shaped by early trauma, instability, and relentless self-reinvention. Her story is not just about success, but about endurance under conditions that could have easily ended differently. The world saw the smile, the interviews, the applause, and the empire, but far less visible were the emotional costs carried through decades of achievement. To understand her legacy, it is necessary to look beyond the polished image and examine the early life experiences that shaped her worldview, ambition, and deep drive for control over her own narrative and destiny. A childhood born in poverty and instability, Oprah Winfrey was born in 1954 in rural Mississippi, a region marked by racial segregation, poverty, and limited opportunity for many African American families. Her early circumstances were defined by instability rather than security. Raised initially by her grandmother, she lived in an environment where basic comforts were rare, and survival shaped daily life. Clothing was often handmade from whatever materials were available, and toys or luxuries were non-existent. Despite this, her grandmother introduced her to reading at an unusually early age, planting the seeds of intellectual curiosity that would later become central to her identity. Her early years reflected both deprivation and resilience, where imagination and language became essential escapes. This period established the emotional foundation of a child learning to navigate hardship while quietly absorbing the power of stories, communication, and self-expression as tools for eventual transformation beyond her surroundings. Early literacy as a gateway to survival during her formative years. Oprah's grandmother played a decisive role in shaping her intellectual development. Despite strict discipline and limited resources, she introduced Oprah to reading using the Bible as a primary text. This early exposure created a rare sense of structure and meaning in an otherwise unstable childhood. Words became more than communication, they became refuge. Through reading, she discovered worlds beyond her immediate environment, offering psychological escape from poverty and loneliness. This intellectual awakening was critical because it provided her with a sense of identity separate from her circumstances. While many aspects of her childhood were defined by hardship, literacy gave her agency. It allowed her to imagine futures that were not predetermined by geography or social limitation. This early relationship with language would later become one of her most powerful professional tools in connecting with audiences across emotional and cultural boundaries. Trauma, silence, and the loss of safety as she moved into early adolescence, Oprah's life became marked by profound trauma and instability that deeply affected her sense of safety. The absence of consistent protection and emotional support left her vulnerable during critical developmental years. She experienced abuse within her extended environment, and the emotional consequences were long-lasting. Rather than receiving validation or understanding, she internalized shame and confusion, which distorted her sense of responsibility for events beyond her control. Silence became a coping mechanism, and emotional isolation intensified her internal struggle. Despite outward signs of academic ability and potential, she carried a heavy psychological burden that shaped her behavior and self-perception. These experiences created a fracture between her external achievements and internal suffering. The long-term impact of these years would later surface in her openness about trauma helping others recognize the importance of breaking silence around abuse and psychological harm in childhood. Environments. Adolescence, displacement, and searching for structure at a critical stage in her adolescence. Oprah was sent to live with her father in Nashville after instability in her earlier home environment. This transition introduced a more structured and disciplined household, which contrasted sharply with her previous experiences. Her father emphasized education, rules, and accountability, creating a framework that helped redirect her life. However, emotional healing was not immediate, and she continued to carry the psychological weight of earlier trauma. During this period, she began to channel her energy into academics and public speaking, discovering that communication could serve as both expression and protection. The discipline imposed by her father, while strict, provided boundaries that helped her regain a sense of direction. This phase marked the beginning of her transformation from a troubled teenager into someone capable of envisioning a future defined not by survival alone, but by achievement and influence. A teenage pregnancy and the weight of loss at 14, Oprah faced one of the most devastating events of her early life, a pregnancy resulting from prolonged abuse. The experience was emotionally overwhelming and deeply isolating. She attempted to conceal it, burdened by fear and shame, but eventually the situation became known within her family. The child was born prematurely and died shortly after birth, adding another layer of grief and psychological trauma. This loss was interpreted by her younger self as punishment, a tragic misunderstanding shaped by emotional vulnerability and lack of support. The experience left a lasting imprint on her perception of motherhood, responsibility, and self-worth. It also reinforced her determination to take control of her future in ways that would prevent similar cycles of instability. This period represents one of the most painful chapters in her life, shaping her later decisions regarding relationships, family, and personal boundaries. Rebuilding identity through education and expression following her early hardships, Oprah began to rebuild her identity through education, performance, and communication. She discovered that speaking and storytelling could serve as powerful tools for connection and influence. Her natural ability to engage audiences set her apart from peers, and she began pursuing opportunities in broadcasting. This period marked a shift from internalized trauma to external expression. Instead of being defined solely by her past, she started to construct a future based on talent and discipline. Her early work in media demonstrated both charisma and emotional intelligence, allowing her to connect with audiences in ways that felt authentic and relatable. Gradually, she transitioned from local media roles into larger platforms, building the foundation for what would eventually become a groundbreaking career in television. This transformation was not immediate but developed through consistent effort and an evolving sense of self-direction. The rise of a revolutionary television presence, Oprah's entry into national television, marked a turning point not only in her life but in the history of media. Her talk show quickly distinguished itself through emotional openness, audience engagement, and a focus on personal storytelling. Unlike traditional formats, her approach prioritized vulnerability and human connection, allowing guests to share deeply personal experiences. This style resonated widely with viewers and transformed daytime television into a space for emotional exploration. Her influence grew rapidly, and her show became a dominant cultural force for decades. The success was not accidental, but the result of intuitive communication skills combined with an understanding of human psychology. Over time, she became more than a host. She became a trusted figure in millions of households, shaping conversations about relationships, identity, and personal growth across American culture. Building ownership and the Harpo Empire, A defining moment in Oprah's career was her decision to establish her own production company, giving her full control over her content and creative direction. This move was strategically significant, as it allowed her to retain ownership of her work in an industry where many creators lacked control over their intellectual property. Through this structure, she expanded into film, publishing, and later cable television ventures. Her business decisions reflected a long-term vision focused on independence and legacy building. The creation of her media empire represented both financial success and symbolic empowerment, particularly for women and Black entrepreneurs in media industries. However, this level of control also came with immense responsibility, requiring sustained effort and constant innovation to maintain relevance in a rapidly changing entertainment landscape. Success, isolation, and personal sacrifice despite extraordinary professional achievements. Oprah's life has often been marked by personal sacrifice and emotional complexity. Long working hours, intense public visibility, and the demands of managing a global brand contributed to periods of isolation. While she formed meaningful relationships, including a long-term partnership, she has often spoken about choosing work as a central focus of her life. The demands of her career left limited space for traditional family structures, and she made conscious decisions regarding motherhood and personal commitments. This balance between public influence and private solitude reflects a recurring tension in her story. Success brought freedom and power, but also distance from ordinary experiences of companionship and stability. Her journey illustrates the complexity of achieving extraordinary influence while navigating deeply personal emotional trade-offs. Philanthropy, education, and global influence in later years. Oprah devoted significant resources to philanthropy, particularly in education and women's empowerment. One of her most notable contributions is the establishment of a leadership academy for girls in South Africa, designed to provide opportunities for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. This initiative reflects her belief in education as a transformative force, mirroring her own early experiences with learning as escape and empowerment. She has also supported scholarships, disaster relief, and community development programs globally. While her charitable efforts are widely recognized, they also exist within broader discussions about wealth distribution and responsibility. Nevertheless, her impact in this space is substantial, particularly in providing access to education for those who might otherwise lack opportunity. Her philanthropy represents an extension of her personal narrative into systemic change. Legacy, reflection, and emotional complexity. Oprah Winfrey's legacy is multifaceted, combining extraordinary professional success with a deeply complex personal history. She transformed television, built a media empire, and became one of the most influential figures in modern culture. Yet her story also reflects enduring themes of trauma, resilience, and emotional cost. Public admiration often focuses on achievements, but her life also reveals the hidden psychological dimensions of sustained success. Questions of loneliness, identity, and personal fulfillment remain central to understanding her journey. Her experiences demonstrate that achievement does not erase history, nor does wealth eliminate emotional complexity. Instead, her life illustrates how individuals can rise beyond difficult beginnings while still carrying the imprints of those early experiences. Conclusion: triumph intertwined with human cost. Oprah Winfrey's journey from a difficult childhood to global influence is often framed as a story of triumph, but it is equally a story of endurance and emotional complexity. She overcame circumstances that could have defined her life in entirely different ways, transforming pain into purpose and visibility. However, her success also came with personal sacrifices, that are less visible to the public eye. Her story challenges simplistic narratives of success by revealing the psychological and emotional layers beneath achievement. It shows that even the most influential figures carry private histories that shape their decisions and identities. Ultimately, her legacy is not only about power or wealth, but about resilience, transformation, and the ongoing negotiation between public greatness and private humanity.